Saint Therese of Lisieux wrote what is considered one of the great classics of spiritual life in Catholicism, The Story of a Soul. If you never had a chance to read it, or I should say better, to pray through it, I highly recommend it. And in The Story of a Soul, she talks about her struggle of trying to figure out how she fits into the church. She looks at the great saints, the martyrs, the great confessors, those who had triumphed in so many different ways. And as she looked at how they lived their lives, she felt that was above or beyond her, or she didn't feel it quite fit the life she knew that God was calling her to. But yet she wanted more than anything else to be a saint. And that really should be the goal for all of us. As I always say to people, if you don't want to be saint, you're going to be a little warm. Sainthood is not really an option. It is the requirement. It's the end point of Christian life. And more than anything else, that was her deepest desire. And as I said, she struggled to figure out exactly where she would fit in. And then one day, as she was reading St. Paul, it struck her. She came to realize what it was that God was calling her to be. Love. Now, when we hear that, I think too often we treat what Jesus says to us today and in other passages almost as a bumper sticker. Love God, love neighbor, and we figure, okay, as long as I'm feeling good about other people, I'm fine. And so when people hear about the little way, as what Saint Therese calls us to, they think it's this simple little thing. I'm just going to love people. That's easy enough. But what Saint Therese was calling us to do was anything but easy. In many ways, it's the most difficult challenge that a saint has actually ever proposed. That love truly be the center of our entire life. And when we listen to a different passage from St. Paul, but ties into both what we hear today and what St. Therese was trying to accomplish, it is something that we hear at weddings all the time. But I'm not so sure we actually hear it. Love is patient. Love is kind. It is not jealous. Love is not pompous. It is not inflated. It is not rude. It does not seek its own interests. It is not quick-tempered. It does not brood over injury. It does not rejoice over wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. I think the problem is many times when we hear this, we treat it as an ideal, something that we should be striving for, but we're never quite going to get there, because that's not what God expects of us. But the truth is very different. This is the love that Saint Therese was speaking about. This is the love that God actually expects of us. It's not the ideal. Paul is giving us the definition of love. Too often we can fall into the trap of treating relationships and love as transactional. Well, if I'm doing this good thing for you, there's got to be something in return for me. I've got to get something back from this. That's not love. That's a transaction. Once there is an expectation, there's no longer love. And that's the hard part. When Jesus hung on the cross, he had no expectation. He hung simply because that's what we needed. Whether we responded to that or not, Jesus was going to die for us. Whether we would choose to live out our faith as we're called to, Jesus was going to die for us. No matter what our response is, Jesus is going to love us, and he died for us for that reason. And so the little way that St. Therese calls us to is that life of patience. That person who truly annoys us. And let's all be honest, we have them. St. Therese even talked about it. There was this nun that she would have to go into chapel with and pray with during her holy hour. And this nun was a little bit hard of hearing. And so she was praying her rosary, and they were rather large. Each bead, as she moved each bead, that's what St. Therese heard. And it irritated her to no end. She was very clear about that. But she came to realize how she was called to love this other nun. It was to move beyond the irritation, to grow in patience with her, and just to accept her limitations. She expected nothing back, no change from the other person. It was her who had to change. And that's what love calls us to do. As we hear that, it does not seek its own interests. It does not rejoice over wrongdoing. It does not brood over injury. This is love. And this is the love that our God is calling us to. This is the love that Jesus is talking about. This is the little way of St. Therese. It's not a soundbite. It's not a bumper sticker. It is intended to truly be a way of life. May we come to truly open to the love that our God is calling us to. Unconditional, unmerited, unwarranted. That is how our God loves us. And that is how he calls us to love others. Unconditionally, unmerited, unwarranted. And we don't get to pick and choose who we're going to love. Because the simple fact is, if a person exists, not if they're alive, if a person exists, in heaven, in hell, and purgatory, their very existence is for one reason. God loves them. And if God loves them, we have no choice. We must love them as God loves them. Doesn't matter the border, doesn't matter the relationship. All that matters is they exist and they are loved by God. May we come then to open our hearts to the little way. May we come to truly embrace love as God embraces it for us. May we choose the journey, that little way, the way of love.